Today I'm reviewing Rage 2, a game that was announced with this borderline BDSM trailer just a year ago. Published by Bethesda and co-developed by id Software and Avalanche Studios, Rage 2 promised an open-world FPS where anarchy rules and insanity runs rampant. From the moment the game was revealed, I was hooked. It looked to be a rock-solid FPS from arguably the king of the genre, and partnering with the studio behind Just Cause made perfect sense to bring it to the next level. But did it live up to the hype? Initially, I loved Rage 2. I even put out an obnoxious tweet after 2 hours of game time claiming that anyone who doesn't love it doesn't like fun. Time to file that onto the cold takes folder. Dumb tweets aside, it 100% delivers on fast-paced gunplay. The weapons in this game serve as a love letter to Doom 2016. You've got your rocket launcher, your powerful railgun, your heavy-duty energy weapon. The list goes on, and they're all so fun to play with. They just feel weighty and satisfying in a way that you don't get from any other game outside of Doom. And surprising no one, Rage 2 has a fantastic shotgun. No one makes a better shotgun than id, period. Wielding these weapons of destruction is really insanely fun, plain and simple. There's a solid variety of powers that feel satisfying to chain together. Pulling guys in with Vortex and using Slam to finish them off makes me feel like I'm a Vanguard Shepard in Mass Effect. The dueling pianos style combat between guns and powers gives you the freedom to mix and match Walker's abilities in any given situation. Adding to the combat is a robust upgrade system, which allows you to customize your weapons and abilities far beyond their initial capabilities. All of the progression is tied to collecting these little blue crystals called Feltrite, while also opening arc chests for nanotrite boosters and weapon core mods. I was shocked repeatedly at the amount of upgrades and choice given to guns and abilities. There's a lot of yes/no binary choices, but also a lot of this or that reminded me a lot of Doom's upgrade system. Same goes with the weapons. Every single one has an alternate fire mode that reminded me a lot of Doom. My only gripes for combat are that some of the powers feel really bare and lack the attention that other ones seem to have gotten. For example, Rush just makes you sprint faster for a few seconds, and I wouldn't consider that a power. I found the method of unlocking powers and guns to be tedious and easily missable. Scattered around the map, you'll find arcs which contain new powers and weapons. In theory, that's a fine concept, but these are essentially hidden unless you decide to explore all of the map or go and learn of the locations via info sellers or talking with civilians. This led to me spending 80% of the game without the hyper cannon or the vortex ability. By the end, I felt a little cheated because I chose not to explore as much of the world as they assumed that I would. I'd absolutely consider gunplay to be the game's biggest strength, but I didn't experience the full effect of it for the majority of my time with the game, and that feels like a waste. Regardless, I still had a blast with what I did use, and that didn't detract from the fun that I'd already had. I could sit here all day praising the combat, but I don't think anyone is knocking Rage 2 for its FPS action. The issue is, every other moment outside of the gunplay feels dull. For a game that sells itself on anarchy and insanity, there is so much downtime. I feel like the source of my insanity came from how much mindless looting I ended up doing. Rage 2 falls into the same traps that most, if not all, open world games do. It has a large, sprawling world that is so beautiful to look at, but not all that fun to play in outside of gunfights. Throughout most of my playthrough, I couldn't help but think, wow, this would have been so much better as a corridor shooter. As I put more time into the game, I realized I was forcing myself into a gameplay loop that interrupted the action even more. Each time you visit a new location, you have a primary objective. Clear the camp, defend the area, destroy the sentry, etc. While you're having a blast blowing up bad guys, and you're really having a blast, you're reminded that there are X amount of containers and data pads to collect in this area. I don't know about you, but when a game plasters these on my screen, I feel guilty if I don't do them. Even if I consciously understand that yes, this is 100% optional and I can play the game from start to finish and still enjoy it without doing them. I still do them. And it went a step further for me. I became anxious during the combat sequences that I was gonna have to collect things shortly after. Shooting enemies became a means to an end. I was only killing these guys so I could then go out into the world, explore, and scavenge and loot for everything to complete those secondary objectives. And to pile on, some of these containers are legitimately so well hidden, it's insane. I'd spend 5 to 10 minutes looking for a single container and get frustrated because I just couldn't find it. I had to break that habit about a dozen hours in because I just wasn't having fun and I wanted to get back to what I enjoyed most about the game. I'm all for difficult puzzling in games, but not in an open world FPS where there's a billion map markers to uncover and go and do that in. Obviously, this is super subjective because some people genuinely enjoy going and clearing off map markers all day long. Hell, Ubisoft built an entire reputation based off of that concept. But to tell you the truth, personally, I am really over that, especially if it feels detached from the core gameplay loop. As I've grown older, I really appreciate a game with no fat on it. Everything that exists is essential, and anything extra requires very little in terms of time and attention for me to experience. The most recent game that nails this idea is A Plague Tale: Innocence. Nothing in that game exists as filler. If it's there, it's because it matters and it adds to the overall experience. Hell yeah, I'll take a minute to search around for a flower so that a little boy will place it in his sister's hair because it develops their relationship, which is core to the narrative, and it balances the emotionally heavy toll of surviving a plague with genuinely touching moments between siblings. On the other hand, will I go and collect storage containers stocked with feltrite to upgrade my character and scavenge for data pads filled with irreverent nonsense for hours on end? The answer for me is no. And it might be yes for you if you enjoy collecting things just for the sake of collecting them. In which case, yes, that might be genuinely fun to you. Adding insult to injury are these annoying pop-ups that yank your attention out of the gameplay for 10 to 15 seconds at a time. Their only purpose is to display the reputation boost that you gain from completing the activity. I cannot tell you how counterintuitive this feels from a design perspective. Even if I cleared out the enemies, I don't want to be forced to watch this every single time I complete a location-based objective. And keep in mind, there are like 50 to 100 of these scattered throughout the game. This could be shown somewhere on the screen. I get where they were coming from because it is useful information, but it shouldn't block my view and it definitely should not pause the game for me. Even though it's rife with filler content, it is hard to ignore just how beautiful this world is. Flat out, Avalanche and id deserve credit for this gorgeous wasteland in quality and quantity. It's an incredible feeling to be able to summon your gyrocopter, hop in and fly just about anywhere you can see without interruption. Taking on the game's vehicle activities is fun for the first few times, but it does get fairly repetitive. I enjoyed it, but I expected a lot more from the studio that brought us Mad Max. The game's few but detailed indoor areas provided a nice respite from the open world action. A handful of places felt like they were ripped straight from Doom 2016, which I was more than happy with. I found the variety between the game's 6 zones surprisingly great too. From the Secreto wetlands to the wilds to the Dune Sea, there's a real diversity in the environment over the course of the game. Luckily, the story sends you across the entire map, so you're traveling between them consistently. Speaking of story, I'm disappointed to say there's really nothing to write home about. Rage 2 is about revenge and stopping the big bad guy, and it's painfully aware of it too. The fourth wall-breaking humor is hit or miss, sometimes feeling a bit heavy-handed for my taste. You're introduced to a character early on that Walker, the protagonist, has an emotional connection with, but they're gone before you really even get to know them. There's no unique twists or turns in the narrative. Nothing really surprised me or grabbed my attention. The story design is fairly generic and probably something you've seen before. There are 3 people you need to ally with in order to complete Project Dagger, which just means they all have subsequent quest lines, which are color-coded of course, and you must complete all of them leading up to the final mission. Each faction also has a reputation meter. The more corresponding activities you complete, the better upgrades you will earn. It's very cut and dry, simple to understand, and that's usually something I appreciate, but I just expected more from this game. Every piece of narrative outside the main story is inconsequential and honestly mindless. I don't think I got anything out of a single audio diary, data pad, or optional conversation. Sure, you could argue it lends to the overall anarchy vibe that Rage 2 is going for, but I can't help but feel I wasted so much time searching for people to talk to and for data pads to uncover, and by the end there was no payoff for all of that, and it felt like wasted time, and I was so disappointed. Same goes for the game's cities. Wellspring, Gun Barrel, Laguni, I'd argue none of them are really worth exploring. After exploring them in depth, the only reason I was there was to visit the vendors, and unfortunately those were not marked on the map. While the cities are relatively small, they're not easy to navigate, and so the vendor locations are forgettable. I found myself running in circles constantly. While the majority of the voice acting cast is unremarkable, I did enjoy hearing Walker's voice.
Oh, yeah! This is even better than I thought!
For the longest time, I was convinced it was Rob Wiedoff, the guy who voiced John Marston in Red Dead. I think I told my stream this was fact at least a dozen times. Lo and behold, it is definitely not him. Walker is played by Sam Riegel, who most recently voiced characters in Fallout 76 and Soul Calibur 6. I enjoyed his performance and nonchalant attitude. It matched the tone of the game perfectly, and it wasn't too on the nose. Another thing that I truly loved about Rage 2 was the overall aesthetic. The game's menus, the generous use of neon pink, the explosive palette of color mixed with the grunginess of a post-apocalyptic world works really well and feels cohesive throughout. In terms of a fully priced retail game, Rage 2 delivers on volume of content. I think there's enough going on here to warrant paying $60 US. Now, whether you want to experience all the content and stretch this game to its 20 to 25 hour playtime maximum is another thing entirely. The required story content will take you around 10 hours, which is relatively short these days, but that gives you a good idea of just how much filler exists in Rage 2. It's there if you want it, and if you don't mind scavenger hunts and mindless open world activities, this may be well worth your time and money. And if you wanted even more content, you're in luck. In classic 2019 fashion, Bethesda has released a content calendar which details free updates in addition to paid DLC. Free content includes world events, a day 30 update, some weapon skins, cheats, challenges, the one-wheeler vehicle, and a mech. The first expansion, called Rise of the Ghosts, releases in August and will include new story, a new enemy faction, weapons, abilities, vehicles, and areas to explore. The same goes for the second expansion, which is untitled at the time of my recording. At this point, it's hard to tell whether this content will be worthy or whether we'll be thinking this really should have been in the game from day one. I am all for games getting new content post-launch, especially if it's free, and as long as the product is worth the price of admission from day one. And that last bit is debatable for this game, depending on how you feel about open world games, and especially ones that really don't innovate on the genre at all. Rage 2 provides excellent moment-to-moment action that brought me pure joy at times. In the beginning, I thought this game would land in my top 5 for the year purely based off of its combat. It's so fast and fluid, so fun to shoot things and blow them up in this game. But as I sink more time in, it just ran out of steam for me. I realized I was spending hours on end chasing map markers and searching for loot that was devoid of anything meaningful. At the end of the day, I would have preferred a more linear scope with a better focus on the narrative. But hey, on the bright side, it won't be long until we have Doom Eternal to really satisfy that itch. That's it for my review of Rage 2. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new along the way. If you did, be sure to drop a like and share this video with friends who might be interested. If you want to see more from me, click subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.